Hey everybody, Tom Salemi here. Welcome back to the Device Talks weekly podcast. We've got a short but sweet episode for you. Later on, I'll speak with David Saxon and Michael Matson of Needham. We'll talk about the two big M&As of the week. And I don't want to say anything more because it'll ruin the Newmarker's Newsmakers, but lots of insights on what the two deals mean and where M&A is headed. Before that, of course, we'll review Chris Newmarker's Newsmakers. So looking forward to bringing you that list. Before we begin this episode, did want to thank everyone I bumped into at MD&M West in Anaheim for their time and their stories. Great to make the connection and hope to have many of you on an upcoming Device Talks podcast or other Device Talks storytelling platform. So thanks to everyone who took the time to share their stories. Finally, don't forget Device Talks Boston is happening on May 10th and 11th. We're updating the agenda daily almost, but go to devicetalks.com for more information. Finally, we'll be starting up Device Talks Tuesdays. You can go to devicetalks.com to check out those upcoming episodes. We'll start on February 21st, and I'll have a little more information on that episode a little later in the podcast. Now, let's get this episode going. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker. How are you, sir?
Tom Salemi.
Tommy. Oof.
Tommy, I don't know. Yeah.
Nobody calls me Tommy.
That's all right.
Not anymore.
Never mind. Sorry.
It's okay. I don't mind Tommy. Just don't
Like-
call me late for dinner. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Whatever the joke is, I'm
Are you a
tired.
pinball wizard?
Boy, oh boy, we have
Oh,
our
boy.
A material going on today. So
That's.
I flew across country twice this week. What's your excuse?
Oh, I just have little kids, Tom.
That's a good point. That's fair.
Sometimes they keep us up. You know, I'm caffeinating this morning. Actually, I've got my strawberry smoothie right now. I'm going to move on to another cup of coffee soon. So
Super healthy. So
Yes.
yeah, I had a great week at MD&M West. Visit with a lot of our friends out there. So
how you were telling me that you got a turkey sandwich. Was it from a vending machine or?
it was not a vending machine. It was a little hole, like little carve out in the wall.
You got
where
a
they just had
sandwich from a hole?
They had some coolers with salads and sandwiches in them, and they had automatic. Actually, I posted the video of the automatic Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, that was nifty.
It was nifty, except
Yeah.
and I have this issue with people as well. When they fill the coffee to the very top,
Oh,
and then they like hand it to you, and you can't drink it. And
need some.
in this case,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
moving over. Well, not in that case with the video, but the next day I was pulling out my coffee cup, and someone bumped me, and it poured scalding hot coffee all over my right hand.
Oh,
Yes,
oh.
that was enjoyable. And then I went to the restroom to pour water on it, and that was also hot.
Just double scald. Oh,
And then I had to go out and shake hands. I was like, "Oh my god!"
Ah.
Yeah, it was not the best part of my 2 weeks,
Wow.
but it was good coffee, and I would like to have one of those
That's
in
good.
my home. It's very convenient.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But it was good to see people at MD&M. Great to see. It was. I thought it was a good crowd. You talk to people, and some say it
Yeah.
was this or that, but it's just good to bump into people enjoying our podcast, and good to connect people with Jim Hammerand at Medical Design Outsourcing. But
Yeah.
so good couple of days overall. But happy to be home.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's good to get out and meet with people. That's one thing I'm just so glad about over the past year is just getting out and getting networking done. I mean, I even stopped over near the end of Medical Alley, the Medical Alley Summit in downtown
How was that?
Minneapolis yesterday. It was good. It was good to catch up with a lot of those people in person. So it was a good deal. It's nice to actually network, talk to people in person, and just
Absolutely. We're getting out there. So, and we'll, of course, have Device Talks Boston happening May 10th and 11th. So, be another great opportunity for folks to network then and there.
exactly, yeah. And you're starting to get this show together. I mean, my goodness. Who are some of our top speakers at this point?
Well, we'll have Mike Mahoney at Boston Scientific. We've talked about Tom Poland at
Fantastic.
BD, Robert Cohen at Stryker, We will have Anna's Dwa from Moon Surgical. They're all up on the website. But have to have Megan Scanlon from Boston Scientific. We'll have folks from Medtronic and Olympus and Philips and many, many others. So yeah, it's coming together. But I need to get the details up on the website, and that will happen very soon.
If people are listening to this and they're feeling FOMO, there's a good reason.
Exactly. They should have a big faux of the Mo. No, that doesn't make any sense.
Of the Mo. Yeah. It sounds good though. I like it.
Well, all right. Well, we are at the time when we're going to talk about what are we talking about, Chris?
The Newmarkers, Newsmakers.
That's absolutely right. It was a busy week here in the in the news department, and when we get to number one, actually our two interviews of the day a single interview with two people a day will be centered on item number one. So, but I've probably already revealed it earlier in the podcast, but I'll play coy right now, and we'll keep it open. So, Chris Newmarker, give us the big number 5.
Hey, well, number 5 on the list was Inspire Medical. Rose on a massive fourth quarter earnings per share beat. I mean, they had $3.2 million in profits in their fourth quarter of 2022, and this was the first time that they've had a profitable quarter. So I mean, they for those who don't know what they do, they have an implantable sleep apnea treatment. It's basically kind of like a pacemaker, except the pacemaker is like treating sleep apnea symptoms at night, and they've gotten a bit of a boost because of the massive Philips CPAP recall that's going on. So that I think that's increased demand for some people with sleep apnea problems to say, hey, maybe I should just get this little implantable device that can solve this problem for me. So just kind of an exciting company based here in Minneapolis, where I'm based. So just some really good news, and they actually their revenue was up 37 to 40% compared with the previous year. So they're just growing a lot. Definitely think we'll. I suspect that when we get our MedTech Big 100 report together later this year, that we'll be seeing Inspire on this list.
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll talk a bit about the Big 100 in a little bit, because I think some changes have been made. But some
of these changes should help Inspire get on there. That's for
exactly. Sure. Tim Herbert, CEO of Inspire, has been leading the company really since its start. So it's amazing where they're going. We had him on the podcast last year, and lots going on over there. Great neuromod technology that probably has applications outside of sleep apnea. So nice to see Inspire getting some serious traction. So good for them.
Yeah, really cool. Nice to see a company that's still a young company that's growing so well. So and has a technology that's obviously helping a lot of people and gaining a lot of interest. So very cool.
All right, so let's roll on to number 4, which is something we might be seeing Sunday night, right, Chris Newmarker?
Yeah, that's right. We got Dexcom is doing a Super Bowl ad.
Fantastic.
I got Nick Jonas. Nick Jonas is going to be talking about the launch of Dexcom's next generation G7 continuous glucose monitor, and it's Jonas. We best know of as being part of the Jonas Brothers. He has type 1 diabetes. So, and he uses Dexcom CGM. So
he says Dexcom CGM has changed my life and revolutionized the way I take care of my health. Been hearing a lot from Dexcom lately, and for good reason. So be great to see them on the Super Bowl, or in between the Super Bowl as a Super Bowl commercial.
It's really cool to hear testimonials like that. I know even on this podcast, like a few weeks ago, we had Paul Graham from MedTech Innovator was, describing some of his experiences. He has type 2 diabetes, but he's describing his experiences with the, Dexcom CGMs. I think they should have gotten Paul on the Super Bowl ad. Come on. Who needs Nick Jonas? Get Paul Grand on there.
Paul is a bigger star than this. Who's this? What's his name again? Jonas? I've never heard of him.
Jonas what?
But we did have Kevin Sayer on the podcast. Sean Hooley interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, talking about Dexcom's opportunities outside of diabetes as well. So Exciting time for Inspire number 5 and Dexcom number 4.
This full story is actually on our drug delivery business news site, and I just would have to say that Sean is just doing a great job, just really covering the heck out of what's going on with diabetes tech right now in that space. So if you're interested in diabetes tech, follow Mass Device, but also keep a good eye on our drug delivery business news site.
The diabetes space came up a lot this week, talking with various companies in there. I had a meeting with talked with the folks at Matson about the use of their pumps in diabetes technologies, in addition to others. So it's definitely an area where it's taking on multiple levels or multiple layers of technologies and devices that need additional coverage. So that's something that I'm sure Sean Hooley will be all over. But let's move on to number 3. Big news there as well.
Yeah, number 3 on the list, we've got surgical robotics news. We've got J&J's Ethicon completing their first robot-assisted kidney stone removal with their Monarch platform, which the name Monarch gave me the chance on LinkedIn to say that Ethicon's trying to become a king of kidney stone removal.
There you go. Look at you.
Bum. But in their news release, they discussed like some of the research they already have that's kind of backing up that using the Monarch for kidney stone removal is producing better outcomes for people who need this procedure. And so I as someone who's I'm moving through my 40s, I luckily have not had a kidney stone yet, but
nor have I, knock wood. But we know that some who have, and it sounds unpleasant.
Yes,
as the reputation proceeds. So I haven't heard of or as the reputation suggests, I haven't heard of surgical robotic technology used in the kidney stone area before. Have you? Is this the first time?
I have not. No, and
obviously prostate with Intuitive, but not kidney stones.
Actually, in their news release, they said it's the first successful robotically assisted electromagnetic guided percutaneous access and mini percutaneous nephrolithotomy procedure. So wow, that was a mouthful there. But yes, so that's they're definitely getting some firsts in there. And actually a quote they have in here from a doctor at chair of the UCI School of Medicine urology department, was saying that this is the first clinical study in the world to research and demonstrate the potential for improved navigation, access, and clearance and control in these mini PCNL procedures using the Monarch platform. So
that's
very,
great.
Very cool. Getting a lot of buzz on LinkedIn. It's great to see like all the different ways that surgical robotics is like expanding into all these different types of procedures and hopefully driving some improvement.
And going back to Device Talks Boston, that's of course will be paired with our Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum, and we'll be sharing a keynote presentation with our friends at on the robotics side of our business. They booked Martin Buehler, who's global head of robotics R&D for Johnson & Johnson MedTech, and he'll be presenting where J&J is. So I'm sure they'll be talking about this big win at Device Talks Boston. That'll happen on May 11th. So looking forward to hearing what Martin Buehler has to share.
Yeah, fantastic.
We're going to take just a quick break from this Newmarker's Newsmakers to remind you that season 4 of Device Talks Tuesdays starts up on February 21st. This first episode will be run at noon. You can watch it live at noon Eastern, or, of course, on demand at your leisure. But either way, you need to register. The title is How Medical Device Makers Can Vex Cyber Threats and Secure the Healthcare Supply Chain. Proud to be working with Cybellum Technologies on this discussion. In this presentation, the experts from Cybellum will demonstrate the potent power of VEX. That's the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange. It's a new security advisory that's complementing software bill of materials, SBOMs, that help the medical device supply chain focus on the most dangerous vulnerabilities out there. So if you have concern about your supply chain, and you probably should, you definitely want to register. Again, you can watch it live, you can watch it on demand, but all you need to do is register. It's free, it's important, and you should definitely be there. Go to devicetalks.com for more information about this presentation. Again, it's happening February 21st at noon. I look forward to seeing you there. All right, Chris Newmarker, what is number 2 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Well, number 2 on the list, we have 3M. This is a little bit more on this whole Texas two-step strategy thing going on, but they're since that J&J losing that appeal over their strategy with the LLC, they spun out over the talk-related litigation. And now we've got lawyers representing, present and former U.S. military members that are suing 3M, that are trying to get 3M's, bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy for their Aero Technologies subsidiary thrown out, and especially because they're pointing to, the ruling in the J&J case, and saying that this ruling is showing that the 3M case should get thrown out. So there's a hearing coming, and it's going to be happening in coming days over this motion to dismiss, and we'll see what happens here. And it's worth noting at the same time that 3M's been looking to get a Chapter 11 done for this earplug subsidiary, that they've also been looking to spin out their healthcare business. So as this proceeds, we'll see how this affects how this might potentially affect the healthcare spin out as well. So just interesting, just actually a big corporate legal issue right now, like how much courts are willing to allow companies to kind of do this strategy of, having a subsidiary file for Chapter 11, or spinning out an LLC with the liability, having them file for Chapter 11 to try to, reduce potentially huge payoffs, when they're getting sued a lot for something.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about lawsuits, unfortunately, but I'll just add that at this week, 3M unveiled its new medical adhesive that can stick to the skin for up to 28 days. So we're talking about all glucose monitors and things that need to be stuck to the skin. 3M is working on ways of keeping things on the body for longer. So
and I've talked to some of their top people around that in the past, and it's a really big challenge with wearables that a lot of people covering the space don't pay attention to. But trying to get that adhesive just right so that, it sticks something to the skin, but you don't want it to stick too much, though, because you don't want something coming off when you're, taking off whatever wearable device you have. So, that's something else that they've been able to extend that to 28 days at this point. It should, longer monitoring time. So that'll be great.
Yep, I got to see it there at MD&M West. So looking forward to hearing more about that story as well.
Yeah, and actually, I actually wrote about the 28-day adhesives on medical design outsourcing. So if you want to find out more about that, go over to MDO and check out the article.
Fantastic. All right, Chris Newmarker. I think everyone probably knows what our number 1 stories will be, but why don't you end any suspense that is existing?
All right. Number 1 on the list, we've got some really big acquisition news. We've got Abbott, they plan to acquire cardiovascular systems for $890 million. CSI, their portfolio includes the Diamondback 360, which is a major system for atherectomy. The atherectomy is a minimally invasive procedure that it cuts plaques from the walls of the blood vessels. So, it's used in addition to, or as an alternative to, balloon angioplasty. But Abbott, they're a major company in the angioplasty and stent space. So, there's a lot of complementary technology there. The analyst comments that, I was seeing after the deal were pretty positive about it. They think Abbott's making a good acquisition play to burnish their cardiovascular portfolio. So really exciting news. And
the bigger deal was Nuvasive being acquired by Globus Medical.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. This on the same day we had, Globus Medical announcing that they're going to be, merging with Nuvasive, which would, create a, much larger musculoskeletal company, in the ortho space. It seemed like the analysts weren't as positive about that potential deal at this point, but definitely would create a much larger company. It would be neat to see what they'd be able to do. We had that. It was actually a pretty wild day. We had the Abbott acquisition news. We had that merger going on with Globus and Nuvasive. We had GE Healthcare announcing that they're going to acquire Caption Health, which is going to like add a bunch of AI to their ultrasound offering. So that was big news. And then on the more negative side, we had Baxter, announcing they're going to be doing some layoffs. But I mean, just a lot of news today. I think it's a lot of news in a single day. A lot of news this week. It almost kind of feels like we're getting to near the end of earnings seasons, and companies are just making some big moves now.
Right. So our interview today, I had the great opportunity to speak with Mike Matson and David Saxon. They're both analysts at Needham, and Mike covers cardiovascular systems. So we talked about the acquisition, and he went over the positives for the deal. He thinks it's a nice fit with Abbott. Yeah. And I did get to talk with David Saxon too about Nuvasive, and he sees good synergy between the two. He did have a couple of in his note, and in the interview we talked about one possible concern. I don't want to. You can listen to that.
Yeah, we can't give everything away here. Yeah,
that's right. It's called a tease in the professional business. But overall, we also talked about whether this is a sign of more M&A coming, and the answer is yes. The conditions are right for more of this, but we'll lead off the interview with that big question. So let's before we start the interview with Mike Matson and David Saxon, Chris, we alluded to the big 100 list, the medtech 100 list. What impact do you see this having? Where were Nuvasive and CSI on the list?
Well, exactly. I mean, cardiovascular Systems was number 100 on the list, in their most. So they were right there. But there you go. I mean, that's going to be like a space for a company that was like a little smaller, like maybe Inspire Medical potentially. Hint, maybe they could. This is definitely going to be getting like creating space for more companies to like kind of get into this like tier of being like one of the 100 largest medical device companies in the world. I mean, we also have. When you look at Nuvasive was number 64 on the big 100. Globus was number 74 actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know, but they.
I would have put Globus higher. Yeah, no, we did. I did talk to David Saxon about whether this is a merger or an acquisition, and while it's being called a merger, if you look at who's in charge and who has the board and who the senior team is, it's clearly Globus is taking over.
Not too much. Nuvasive in their most recent annual report, listed, it was like probably like 2021 listing like $1.1 billion in annual revenue. Globus Medical, 958 million. So I mean, not pretty comparably sized companies. So I guess I could see like one, like it's basically like who's acquiring who. But yeah, you're right. When you look at who the leadership is coming out of it, who's getting the larger chunk of stock, it's definitely like more of like Globus acquiring the company for sure.
All right. Well, let's start this interview with Mike Matson and David Saxon of Needham. Well, Mike Matson and David Saxon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
So we had a big day for M&A yesterday, and I appreciate you providing some context. We're going to talk about the Globus-Nuvasive deal and, of course, the Abbott-CSI deal. But before we get into that, Mike, maybe you can start us off. We saw 3 deals announced in a week, these 2, including the GE Caption Health acquisition. Is this an indication of some broader macro conditions for M&A? Is there something afoot?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, I think so. It was slower last year, I think, and just during COVID in general. I think COVID created a lot of uncertainty and made companies maybe less willing to step in and buy things. And then I think for the sellers, the problem was that their stocks became really depressed. They saw a lot of multiple compression, valuations just came down across the board. And I think prior to COVID, multiples were, or I guess maybe a little bit after COVID, when rates started getting cut and whatnot by the Fed and all the stimulus was put into the economy, the multiples really expanded and the stocks ran up, the growth stocks, that is. And so I think early in the pandemic, the buyers were kind of on the sidelines. There was a buyer strike. They didn't want to pay those types of multiples. There wasn't much and many deals that happened. But then I think that reversed. And last year, the growth stocks got clobbered and were down massively. But I think it went from being a buyer strike to being a seller strike, where the buyers were certainly more interested at those valuations, but the sellers were not, kind of in denial. And they hadn't gotten to the acceptance phase yet. And so they weren't really willing to sell at, even healthy premiums over where they were at. If a stock had fallen, from, say, just hypothetically $100 to $50, and someone was going to offer them $75, say, they were still kind of anchored to that $100 level and just probably weren't going to take the 75, even though it was a pretty attractive premium based on where they were trading. I think where we're at now is that it seems like some of these companies, like a CSII, for example, where the stock had really fallen quite a bit over the past couple of years, are maybe more willing to accept, a healthy 50% premium over where their stock is, even if it's putting them at a level that's still way below where they were a year or two ago. And so I think we are going to see more M&A. And the interesting thing about the deals we saw this week is that, both companies, Nuvasive and CSII, had struggled with, their growth in recent years, and the stocks were way below their all-time highs. And even with the premiums they're getting, they're not really getting back anywhere close to those highs. So again, I think that's a sign that some of these beaten up companies are just sort of throwing in the towel and, more willing to take a, healthy premium over where the stock currently is without any hopes of getting back to, all-time highs.
That's interesting. David, in an effort to sound smart on LinkedIn, I opine that this is sort of the flip side to spin-outs that we're seeing. These companies are kind of actually doubling down on areas where they're already core. Is there any connection? I mean, Mike did a great job giving us a broader overview, but is there any relation between companies wanting to get rid of non-core assets and companies like these wanting to double down on core assets?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big focus on, focusing on higher growth, higher margin parts of the business. So we have seen some portfolio management moves, resulting in spinoffs. Medtronic's announced a couple. I'm sure we'll, hear of a few more. So, that's a trend that could pick up. And then, doubling down in core areas. I mean, yesterday's announcement, Globus and Nuvasive merging, that gets Globus, to a larger position in spine. It'll get them to number 2 or number 3 and get them a lot more scale. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Mike said.
Tom, I wanted to add one thing that I forgot to mention. I alluded to this in my earlier comments, but in addition to just the valuation issues we've had where the pendulum swung from one, being overvalued to being undervalued with some of these smaller companies, I think we are finally coming out of COVID. I mean, I guess the country's sort of been out of COVID for a while, but what I mean with this for the industry is that procedures seem to be kind of stabilizing. And what we're hearing from companies with the fourth quarter earnings is that things are kind of getting back to truly normal and truly kind of more where they were in 2019 before the pandemic happened. So I think that's giving companies more confidence that there's no more sort of shoes to drop or surprises that are going to happen with COVID. So they're more comfortable making these types of decisions, around strategy, M&A, or even, spinning things off.
That's an interesting point. I guess in a way, then those companies that maybe were hoping for larger returns or increases to business now have to accept this may be the new normal for procedures. This is what we're getting for business.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's dive into the details. I know you've got a busy day. So David, why don't we start with you in Globus-Nuvasive? So I'm just curious. I've seen it called a merger or a sale. Are we quibbling on what this kind of transaction is? How do you define this this combination of these two companies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess it is more of a sale. I mean, Globus is going to control the ending entity. The CEO and CFO of Globus are going to manage the combined business. Globus's chairman is going to continue to be chairman. So, I mean, I guess it's more of a sale. Mm-hmm. And Globus is just gaining share in spine. Like I said earlier, it gives them scale. They're going to jump to be the number 2 or number 3 position. It could give them an opportunity to really drive adoption of enabling technologies. Globus is number 2 in spine robotics behind Medtronic. So if they can really cross-sell their robotics platform and associated enabling technologies into the Nuvasive base, that could be a source of upside and could result in a successful deal. I would say there's also a number of risks. Spine deals are notoriously disruptive. I would imagine there's going to be some product rationalization, sales force turnover. So that could be a source of disruption and downside. I'd also note Globus, their track record for M&A has been more acquiring a technology or small portfolio and then build off of that. Globus is an engineering company, so they prefer to build versus buy. We've seen that with KB Medical. That was the foundation for their robot. Stelcast, that's their foundation for their hip and knee portfolio. So this is a very different transaction that than they've done in the past. So, Globus doesn't have that muscle memory to really go off of when trying to integrate a much larger business.
That's a great point. And you'd mentioned, just briefly, how do the pipelines match up? Is there a lot of redundancy? Are they very complementary? There are some complementary aspects to it. Nuvasive has a cervical disc they acquired a couple of years back called Simplify. Globus is stronger on the enabling technologies, in my view, at least. So there are some complementary aspects to it, but I think when people think of spine, it's largely viewed as a more commoditized market. So a cage is a cage. So there's going to be redundancies as well. Interesting. And I thought your comment in your note was interesting about the potential for culture clashes. And I think you said that. I'm missing my notes, but maybe I'm paraphrasing. But you identify Globus as more of a disciplined engineering company, while Nuvasive is more of a marketing company. And you said, you noted this could be fine, or this could go in any direction. You did kind of hold up Boston Scientific and Guidant as a comp of when things do go bad, when cultures clash in acquisitions. How do you see this? Maybe you could expand on that point, and how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, sure. So, and I would just note another example is Zimmer buying Biomed, which, also resulted in somewhat of a culture clash. Globus and Nuvasive have different approaches to, running their businesses. And, that's resulted in different financial profiles. Globus is higher growth, higher margin. Nuvasive's lower growth, lower margin. So, there's going to be, with a change in management approach, because Globus is going to run the combined business, I got to imagine that some, personnel at Nuvasive, whether it's, distributors or, back office functions, aren't going to really like working under a different leadership approach. So, I've got to imagine that there's going to be disruption from just working under a different culture. Interesting.
No, that'll be really something to track. I know you folks have a meeting to go to, but let's shift over to Abbott-CSI. Mike, you noted that the timing, that the fit makes sense, but the timing came as a surprise, and that rung true with me, I think, as I indicated earlier. But what was the surprising part? I mean, did you just didn't get any indication from CSI that they were looking for buyers, or likely flip side, Abbott wasn't looking to buy?
Yeah, I mean, generally companies aren't running around talking about, either companies they're going to buy, or the company if they're trying to sell themselves. I mean, occasionally on the sell side, I mean, you will see companies say that they're undergoing a strategic review or something like that, but that was not the case here. I think in this case, there really were no prior rumors of this specific deal. Sometimes there are rumors in the market that come up before deals happen, like in this similar space, like, for example, with Spectranetics, which is another atherectomy company that was acquired by Philips. There were some rumors a few years ago when that deal happened that either they or CSI could have been in play, but that was a long time ago. And then Spectranetics did end up getting acquired. But this time there really was no specific rumors in the marketplace, as far as I'm aware, no media reports or anything like that. So that's why it was a little more surprising. But from a longer term perspective, I've long thought that CSI could be an acquisition target. It's something we talked about in notes we'd published. We'd even specified Abbott and Teleflex as being the two companies we thought would be the most likely to buy it. Again, just based on product fit as opposed to any specific information that we had at the time or anything like that. And as far as, and then we published a list as well of the top 25 companies in the public medtech companies that we think are most likely acquisition targets. And we update that a couple times a year. The last one we had published kind of in late 2022 when we published our 2023 Outlook piece. And we did have CSII and Nuvasive both on that list. So again, not surprising that they got acquired, but you could never really predict the timing of when this is going to happen. And not surprising it was Abbott in my view either, to be honest. But
great point. And portfolio-wise, product-wise, it seems like a dream pairing. You note that Abbott didn't have an atherectomy program, and CSI has thrombectomy, and I'll let you go through the other things they have that I probably can't pronounce. But the one that actually really made my eyebrows go up was their percutaneous ventricular assist device, which would seem to fit nicely into Abbott as well.
Yeah. So I think that the bulk of CSI's revenue is still from atherectomy, peripheral and coronary. And Abbott has a big peripheral and coronary business and a big sales force in both those markets. So they'll probably end up combining the sales forces, I would imagine. It's possible that there's some rationalization there. We'll have to see. But they have a channel to sell these products through, and I suspect they'll combine that with the cardiovascular systems channel. But aside from that, CSI had done a really good job of developing a pipeline and trying to diversify their product mix. And to be fair, I mean, even without the pipeline, they were selling some balloons and guide wires and catheters and things like that. In coronary, it had done really well, and added additional revenue per procedure alongside their atherectomy products. And they were just starting to do that in peripheral. So they already had additional products outside of atherectomy, but then they had some really potentially big products in the pipeline as well. I would say that the ones that, I would highlight would be, they had some drug-coated balloons, they have thrombectomy products, and they have intravascular lithotripsy product, which would compete with Shockwave Medical. And then, as you mentioned, they had the PVAD product. Now, of those, I mean, the PVAD is probably the most complicated of the products in the pipeline. And so, it remains to be seen if that gets commercialized or not. It's possible Abbott could just pull the plug on it. But I mean, it's clearly a big market. Abbott had bought, I believe, Thoratec. And I think Thoratec at one point had a PVAD in development, but I don't know whatever happened with that. I don't actually cover Abbott right now, so I don't know the story there. So it's possible they have another program already in that area of the market. But aside from that, I think the most interesting thing in the pipeline, honestly, is probably their intravascular lithotripsy product, because Shockwave Medical has done extremely well, and calcium in the vessels is a big problem throughout coronary and peripheral. And when we picked up cardiovascular systems to cover it, we recognized that. But cardiovascular systems did well, but it never saw their atherectomy never saw as widespread adoption as it could have or probably should have. And I think it was, there's a learning curve. It's not the easiest thing to use. And I think that, there's doctors maybe are just kind of scared they're going to have some, perforations or something with it. It's very safe, but I think there was maybe just a fear of it generally. And I think Shockwave really made a really easy to use product that, really got just more widely adopted than atherectomy ever did in treating calcium. But, CSI, I think, part of the reason their stock had struggled was because they were, seeing some pressure on their market share because of Shockwave. They don't exactly overlap in terms of where they get used, but there's enough overlap that it was hurting CSI. And so they were going to develop their own system. My understanding is that it's not that complicated. And so I think that has a good chance of seeing the light of day, especially given how big that segment of the market's become now. And it'll likely do more in the hands of Abbott than it would CSI. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, Abbott also doesn't have a drug-coated balloon. They have an agreement with Surmodics to distribute Surmodics Surveil balloon, but there's been some delays in getting that approved. And CSI has 2 drug-coated balloons in development. Now, it's not an either or necessarily, because those are going to take a few years and those use a different drug, the CSI balloons versus the Surmodics balloon. So it's possible that they, do both or pursue both, I guess is a better way to put it, with Abbott. So anyway, I'm sure atherectomy was really the key to the deal. And the rest of it is just kind of gravy because they're not really paying much for this anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they pick and choose among the pipeline, and some of it they'll probably cancel, and some of it they'll probably keep it going and maybe even pump some additional investment into it and try to accelerate it.
Related to the price, and one more quick question and one more larger question, but related to the price for CSI, you mentioned in your note your assumption is the deal will go through, but you did raise the possibility that someone comes in and outbids Abbott. What's the likelihood of that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I specifically addressed that in my note, to be honest.
You said your bull case scenario is another company outbidding Abbott.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah. That's just a hypothetical. I'm not.
Yeah, I understood. It was interesting suggestion. Is that possible, or is that just?
I forgot about that part. But we have to kind of justify
I liked it. It was a good
bull and bear case.
Worst case scenario kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't think, to be clear, I don't think the deal falls apart, and I don't think there's a higher bid. But if the only other company I think that could be interested would be Teleflex. But I think the issue for Teleflex is, while it would be a great fit and complementary. I mean, a few years ago, Teleflex acquired Vascular Solutions, so they have an interventional cardiology business right now focused on complex PCI. They don't have atherectomy, and they're not in peripheral. But most companies in coronary or in peripheral, the products are very similar and they're complementary. So it makes sense. And there's a lot of the doctors that do both types of procedures. So it makes sense to be in both. But for Teleflex is a much smaller company than Abbott.
Right.
It's not that they couldn't easily afford it if they chose to, but the problem is CSI is really not growing that fast. And for Teleflex, I think they're really looking to acquire companies with, stronger growth, double digit or 10% plus type growth. And, I don't think it would have been received well by Teleflex shareholders if they bought CSI at this point in time. Now, if they had gotten their growth back to double digits, it might have gone over better for Teleflex. Mm-hmm. But I think, that it just would have been dilutive to Teleflex's growth. And I think that really would have kept them on the sidelines here, even though the products would have been really complementary. I think for Abbott, they're just such a big company that it doesn't really matter. It's not going to, even if, CSI had flat sales, it wouldn't matter to Abbott's overall revenue. But in the hands of Abbott sales force, odds are it will grow faster, right? Because they have a bigger sales force.
Gotcha.
And they'll probably keep a lot of the CSI reps, I'd imagine. But
excellent. Well, final quick question. I know you have to go. David, do you see any sort of counterpunch happening in the spine side? Someone reacting to this deal? Does this lead to more M&A coming up? Maybe a rival buys another company?
I mean, I guess if you're asking if there's another bidder for Nuvasive, I don't think so.
No, more another spinal company responding to answer to this sort of competitor.
Got it. I don't think there's going to be another deal by a spine company. The only scenario that makes sense to me, at least, is if Smith & Nephew buys something like an Alphatec. There in 2019, there were some rumors that Smith & Nephew was looking at Nuvasive. So if they still, and just for background, Smith & Nephew is more of a hip and knee company. They don't have spine right now. So, if they do still have the aspiration of getting into spine, I think Alphatech is now kind of the next best target for them. So that's, one potential scenario.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Alphatech is an up-and-comer in the spine market. They have, call it a low single-digit market share. So they still have some pockets in the U.S. where they don't have a presence. New York is one, Philly's another, DC's another. So if there is, in fact, disruption from a Nuvasive Globus deal, they can probably benefit by picking off some top-performing distributors and getting some pretty quick access into some of those markets. So they're probably a beneficiary from either failed Globus-Nuvasive deal or it just taking longer with a lot more disruption.
And I'll just add to that there's already a lot of former Nuvasive people at Alphatech,
mm-hmm.
and the CEO Pat Miles was at Nuvasive. CEO of Alphatech was at Nuvasive for a long time, so I'm sure he's probably already calling up those distributors and trying to convince them to join Alphatech.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if that's already happening.
Yeah, and Mike, quickly, how about on the cardio side? Anyone? Is this a challenge that anyone has to answer?
Well, the only company it really has implications for, in my view, is Shockwave, because and this is only assuming that they proceed with this IVL project and it ends up being successful, right? Which, who knows, maybe it doesn't work out, or maybe they just decide to pull the plug on it. But assuming that they do commercialize that, I think it's going to be even more of a threat in the hand to Shockwave in the hands of Abbott than it would be in the hands of CSI's sales force.
Fantastic. I know you both have a meeting to run to. I'm grateful for the time. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Take care.
All right, Chris Newmarker, that is a wrap. Where can folks find you out there in the world of social media?
Hey, I'm on. Best place to reach me is LinkedIn. Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. Always happy to connect.
Absolutely. I'm also on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, and please do share this podcast, this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast on LinkedIn, on Twitter, wherever you want to do it. Make sure you connect with Chris Newmarker and I on those sharings, so we can be part of that conversation. Chris Newmarker, what else do we want folks to do?
You need to like, follow, subscribe.
That's right. Subscribe to the Device Talks Podcast Network so you'll get future episodes of the Device Talks Weekly podcast, the Stryker Talks podcast, the Intuitive Talks podcast, and next month, I think I'm ready to unveil the name, Chris. We're moved forward enough on this new podcast that I think we can tell folks that the Boston Scientific Talks podcast will be rolling out in March, probably at the end of the quarter. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so happy to bring Boston Scientific into the Device Talks Podcast Network family. Lots of great stories to tell there, and I'm really excited to get that one going. So
super exciting. That's awesome.
Another reason to subscribe. So don't miss any of these great podcasts. And of course, get all of your news. Where should they get all of their medtech news, Chris Newmarker?
Hey, massdevice.com.
Absolutely. Best place to go. So, all right. Well, that is a wrap. Tune in next week. I expect to have another episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast, but we'll also be releasing another episode of the Intuitive Talks podcast. So thanks for joining us this week on Device Talks Weekly.
Hey, take care everybody. Have a good weekend.